Okay, so this was your first time with Levinas. Let's see how it went. 10 is ecstatic, 0 is horrified. Any 10s for Levinas? All right, 9, 8, 7, oh dear, 6, 5. Oh, Arshad, was that a 6? No? All right, 5. Still no, nobody? Okay, 4, 3, 2. Okay, Arshad, thank you. Milgram, 2, 1, 0. And most of you didn't vote. That's cheating. Okay. All right, let's hear some of your comments. Since all of you are haters today, we'll just hear from the haters. Anything you need to share and get off your chest before we get into the text. I think whoever raised their hands, Milgram, who was the other person? Arshad, Leong, you guys are welcome to step up. No one? I'm alone today in the class?
I could go.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I just didn't really understand what's going on. Like, I try to make like I know he noticed. I noticed he broke things into sections, and it was only, I believe, like 5 pages today, right, for the reading. It was so short, but yet it was so complex. I just couldn't make any sense out of it. You know, even rereading it or like, because I know he also adds a lot of examples to better explain his concepts, but even that I'm having trouble with his examples. So
Okay.
hopefully, yeah, clarify in class today.
Yes, I warned you guys this was going to be hard. Nobody just enjoyed not understanding. Remember, I told you to do that. Nobody kind of just like went with the flow. Nobody had that moment of ecstasy where you're like, oh, I don't get anything. Yay.
I did that while I was reading. It was just, I was reading in a flow because it just came to me like I was reading and reading. And there were some codes that I was like, that's good, but I don't know what that means.
Good.
Like that happened to me a few times, but I couldn't find myself where because I didn't understand. So I couldn't say that if I liked it or disliked it. So I'm
Oh,
like in between.
that's why we have a bunch of neutrals in the class. Swavely, do you want to add?
Yeah, there were a lot of quotes I really liked, but it just some of them really seemed to contradict each other, so it was hard to really wrap my mind around.
Yes, he's difficult, right? Absolutely. He's if you read him to understand him, you're gonna have a really hard time. I think there was a hand by, was it Williams? Was it you? Yes, go ahead, Williams.
I didn't understand anything at all, but the tone seemed pretty calm. Like it didn't seem biased or like as aggressive as Nietzsche. So it was kind of calm to read, although I didn't really understand anything.
Okay, I like the way you put it. Calm. I see what you're saying. I had never thought of it that way, but yes, you're right. It is kind of calming if you're not trying too hard. Okay, good. So all right, let's see what we can do today with this text. Sorry, go ahead. Whoever is speaking. No, okay. Yeah, page 65 is not there because the text begins on page 66 for the one person who asked that. Yes.
Okay, because on the syllabus I saw from page 65 to 70.
Yeah, 65 is just like an introduction, which you don't need to read. Okay. So very good. All right, let's try and get into the text. Remember, I gave you 2 things I'm going to talk about when we do this text. I'm going to talk about the problem of the hidden God. And then this is for today. And then next time we'll talk about ethics as a path to God. But today we'll focus on the problem of the hidden God. Good. Okay, so like I told you before, right, like I told you in the introduction, we are in the context which has been called the eclipse of God. Let me try and write eclipse here. Why can't I write eclipse? Right. This is a concept by Martin Buber. This is not Levinas, but this is, many people see the time of the Holocaust, right, as the hiding of the face of God, right? God is not, he's not obvious anymore. We don't sense his presence. We don't see his actions. Where is he? right? And if he's anywhere to be found, who is he? Because we can't find him. We don't recognize him, right? So in many ways, right, God is hiding. God is, in a way, he's there, but at the same time, he's not there. It's ambiguous, right? We sense that there must be a God, but at the same time, where is this God, right? So we're torn between God, no God, God, no God, right? This is, by the way, what it means to doubt, right? You're not sure, maybe not, maybe not, right? This is not atheism where you're sure there isn't. This is agnosticism. I thought there was a God, I thought, but now I'm not sure, but maybe, but, right? So this is where we are, right? So he talks about this notion of the hiddenness of God in terms of enigma, right? We're going to go into that, what it means to be an enigma. So let's go into the text so we can see a little bit how he begins to talk about this hiddenness of God. You have already the quote by Ionesco on the top. I don't know if you saw. This is a play, which I should try and read, but the quote is very good. In short, we still do not know if when someone rings the doorbell, there's someone there or not, right? This is the experience of God. We're not sure if there's someone there or not, right? So we're going to talk about that. So let's look a little bit as how philosophy in general has spoken through history, right, through the history of philosophy about this hidden God, right? Levinas is not the first one to talk about the hiddenness of God. Actually, we've been seeing it, right, throughout our journey together, right? Job, it was the hiddenness of God, right? Where when Job is calling out to God saying, why are you doing this to me? This is God being hidden and later on revealing himself. Maimonides, right, talks about the hiddenness of God in the everyday events that are chaotic, but yet we can access, right? Rumi with the experience of suffering. Nietzsche is all about, right, he calls it literally the death of God, right? So we have this, right? Philosophy has been talking about this hiddenness. So let's see a little bit how they talk about it here. So I'm on the top of page 66, the first line, as rational speech. If you're there, put your hand in the screen. Okay. As rational speech, philosophy is taken to move from evidence to evidence, directed to what is seen, to what shows itself, and thus directed to the present. So he's saying here, translation, right? Philosophy is always about figuring things out, clarifying things, knowing things, right? This is the tendency in philosophy. So you can imagine how when it's stumbling across the concept of God, it's going to be like, right? Because we can't clarify this, right? But so in general, right, philosophy wants to clarify, wants to know, it wants to master. And we're going to see that philosophy is going to stumble, right? Your will to know, your will to understand, your will to have clarity will stumble when it comes to the concept of God, right? When it comes to God, there is no clarity, according to Levinas, right? But this is going against the urge of philosophy, right? The urge of the knowing mind to know and to understand and to grasp. But he says, even this mind, even philosophers have accepted the fact that there are certain objects that we cannot know for sure. He says this in the third paragraph, and yet human thought. Put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay. And yet, he says, even though philosophy always wants to know, it is nevertheless aware that there are some objects it will never know clearly. And he says that here. Human thought has known concepts, or has, as though mad, operated with notions in which the distinction between presence and absence was not as clear-cut. Let's stop on that. In other words, there are certain objects that are both present and absent. Right? Philosophy is always trying to figure out what is, how we can understand it, master it. It seeks to understand something and grasp it and make it present, right? When Levinas talks about present, it means it's present, it's obvious, it's clear, it's evident, right? But he's saying philosophy understands that most objects, right, are present. This pen is present, this phone is present, I'm present, right? You can see me clearly, you can see the pen clearly, you can see the phone clearly, right? But philosophy is aware, right? Philosophers are aware that there are some objects which are both present and absent, right? So let's try and figure out what they mean by that, right? Actually, there's one single object in our Zoom classroom, which is right now both present and absent. Can anyone tell me what it is? It's here on the screen in front of me. As I'm looking at you, I see it. What am I seeing in our Zoom classroom that is both present and absent? Yes, very good. Now, how is that? Subonkulova, can you explain what I mean by saying that you, all of you, are both present and absent? Even if we were in a classroom.
We're in the class, but we also have other things going on that you don't know, or the things we don't know about you.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. You're all here on the screen, but I don't know what you're thinking. Maybe you're 10 miles away, right? So I don't know what you've been through today. I don't know what your past is. I don't know. Right. So we as human beings are already this kind of object, which is both present and absent, right? Now the philosophers go even further and they say God is one such object who is both present and absent. Now, can you tell me what that means? What does it mean that God is both always, right? Even if you're a believer, super, pious and fervent, even for you, God remains, as he remains for all of us, both present and absent. What does this mean? Anybody can decipher this crazy idea? Silence. Really, you don't know? Imagine, think. Use your mind.
Where is that quote?
This is on the third paragraph, the first line of the third paragraph on 66. Okay, Wilkes, let's see what you say. He's not physically. Okay, explain to us how God is spiritually here. I want to understand that better. We know he's not physically here, but what do you mean he's spiritually here?
What I mean by that, it's like, or at least people who are religious, like they can feel God's presence even though they can't see him, because it's like the faith that lets them know, like, okay, there is a God. So God is here, but not in the physical sense.
Okay, good. That's one way of putting it. Very good. That works. Let's see. Alim, explain yourself a little bit.
I kind of was like in Job, like we can't really like predict God or like what he looks like or what he's going to do next or like how he shows himself. So like I guess like those are like the absent factors that God has, but like I'm not really sure about like the present, but like absent for sure, like we can't like know like how he interacts with our world specifically, but we can like predict ourselves. I don't know, something like that.
Yes, just like another human being, right? You can't always predict what they're going to do. Likewise, God in Job, especially, right? We saw that God was unpredictable, wild, untamable. This is a kind of absence. You don't know for sure. You don't have a grasp on the situation, right? So very good. I think you're both right. Another way to see it is also to realize that although we have signs that God might exist, at the same time, we can never be sure. Let me give you an example, right? This is for all of us. All of us at some point had some kind of manifestation of God, in the sense of someone told you there is a God, or you had some miracle happen to you, or you had the thought maybe there is a God, right? All of us had some kind of small epiphany or small moment of revelation, but then immediately the mind kicks in and says, well, maybe, but maybe it's just, right? Suppose you had a miracle, you found a parking space right next to Queen's College in 5 minutes, right? Or in your neighborhood, right? And you had asked God, and here's the parking. So you're like, oh, thank you, God. And at the same time, you're thinking, well, maybe it was just luck, right? Or you had some feeling that God was there, like Wilkes was saying, you feel the presence of God. And then part of you is thinking, well, maybe it's just I had a good lunch and I, had all my vitamins, and that's why I have this fuzzy feeling, or I am creating it, right? So do you see how anytime you have a revelation of God, whether it's a small miracle or a sense of the presence of God, or someone tells you about God, there's always going to be part of you saying, well, what if it's just coincidence? Or what if it's not completely true? What if you're just inventing? Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody follows that in that sense, right? God is both present and absent, because, and this is what Levinas is saying, which is so important, because we can never be 100% sure. And this is what we need to accept. especially if we come from a religious background. If you're an agnostic, you already know. We cannot be 100% sure. But as an agnostic, you should realize we can't be 100% sure either of his existence or of his non-existence, right? This is what makes God both present and absent. We can't be sure. So if you're an atheist or if you're a believer who is 100% sure, you're on the wrong path, both of you. Because an atheist is 100% sure there is no God. A believer is 100% sure there is a God, but both for Levinas are missing who God is, because God is not an object of which you can be 100% sure. I can be 100% sure of this pen that is going to work right now, right? Likewise of my phone. But of God, if we start being 100% sure, we're not dealing with God. We're dealing with another object. So anyone who is 100% sure about God, whether they're 100% sure he exists or 100% sure he doesn't exist, are missing the point of who God is. The only person who's got it right, according to Levinas, is the agnostic, because they're not sure. Maybe not, maybe not. And so what Levinas is saying is that this is the only way to really be in touch with this extraordinary transcendent God. Because if you're sure of something, God is just at the level of your certainty. But if you're confused a little bit and not sure, that means you're really now in touch with something beyond yourself. Confusion is a sign, positive sign, that you're in touch with something beyond yourself. Let me write this down because this is the key idea, right? Confusion or doubt is the positive sign that you're dealing with a reality that transcends you, right? If you're sure of it, the reality is you grasp it, you control it, you're in control, you know it, you master it. But if you're not sure, if you're confused, if you have a doubt, small doubt, that means you're really in touch with something which is beyond your understanding. And at that moment, says Levinas, you're in touch with God. Are you following what I'm saying? I need to make sure everyone gets me on this point. Put your hand in the screen if you're seeing what I'm saying, right? So basically Levinas, that's the genius here of Levinas, saying if you're agnostic, you're closer to God than either the atheist, obviously, but also than the believer, right? Or the believer who is 100% sure. Levinas is fine if you're a believer, but if you allow some room for doubt. Maybe like Alim was saying, yeah, you believe there is a God, but you don't know what he's going to do next. At that point, you're fine, right? So it doesn't mean you have to constantly waver between, I'm not sure he exists. No, you can be sure of the existence of God as a believer, or you could feel the presence of God, but you should always have a little bit of a doubt as to who he really is, what he wants, what he's going to do next. You have to leave a little bit of unpredictability, right? Room for unpredictability. So, and likewise, if you're an atheist, okay, you don't see, but you should always remain open to the possibility that there might be a God, maybe down the line, right? So this is what Levinas is saying. The only way to approach God is to have an open mind, is to be ready to be surprised. Let me say that, let me write that down, right? The only way to approach God is to have a certain kind of mind, right? Which is ever ready to be surprised, right? Shocked, moved out of comfort zone, right? So that's the mind actually of the agnostic, right? So what he's saying, even if you're an atheist, even if you're a believer, you always want to keep a little bit of agnosticism in you, like salt, right? You always want to leave some room for questions, uncertainties, confusion. Otherwise, you're building a God at your own image. What's that? A God that's in your own image. What do we call that? We have a name for that. Anybody know? It starts with an I. Yes, idolatry. Very good. We talked about this, right? So anytime you're sure of God and what he's going to do next, actually, you're not dealing with God. You're dealing with your idol that you made, right? So that's the idea. What Levinas is saying is that, yes, we're in a period of doubt and confusion after the Holocaust. We don't see clearly. We don't know God, but he's saying this moment is already a path to God. In this moment, we are ready for a new revelation. That's what's happening, right? So in a way, the Holocaust and the confusion that ensues and all of the doubts and the questions is paving the way because we are open and questioning and confused, now maybe we will get a deeper revelation of who God is, right? And this is, in a way, exciting, right, for Levinas. Now we are ready to know more, to grow our perception because we are confused. Remember for Job, right? It's only when he started to get confused and angry and frustrated and doubtful that his mind was ready to expand, right? So this is where we are, right? So basically, Levinas is reassuring us, right? Anytime we are in a state of confusion, this is in fact the path to a newer revelation, right? Okay, Milgram, please express to us your disappointment with Levinas.
I feel like the best way sometimes to like reason things like this is just to, I guess like I could say two different things. Like either make it sound like people are just like confused or in the dark or like have previously did not have some knowledge that like now they're suddenly going to gain. And I guess like in like a similar line of thinking, like to like twist it into like, oh, this will be a positive in the future, but not really give clear parameters of like when, how, and like the type of information that you're going to gain from this. Just seems like great, like anyone can say this about anything, but like I don't know, at least to me it seems like a big cop-out
Yes.
answer.
Good. Actually, we have to be careful because Levinas is not going to give us parameters. He's only going to give us the condition of possibility for a new revelation. So in other words, he's not going to tell you what the new revelation will be like for you, right? He can't do that because for Levinas, it's a personal thing. But he's going to say, if you want to have a new revelation, if you want to grow in your understanding, right? This is the stance, right? In other words, the confusion that you're feeling might be a step into deeper revelation. So yeah, of course it would be great, right, for Levinas to say, well, here what it is. But he can't, can he? Right? You can't say who God is, right? But you can say, here's how you can open yourself so that you can have some kind of unique, particular revelation. Am I making sense, Milgram? I don't know if I'm answering your problem.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Like I don't think it answers it still, but
yeah,
like what you're saying.
remember, there are no answers. You can't have answers when it comes to God. You can only have encounters. I think Levinas is close to Buber here when he says God is not someone we can know, but he's someone we can encounter. So like Job didn't, he was confused from the beginning to the end, but he had an encounter. So I think what Levinas is saying is we have to shift from trying to figure out and be in our mind all clear to this kind of journey, right, with God, which entails moments of confusion. Of course, not only, there are moments also of resolution, but in general, to be open to an encounter rather than to be open to something, to a clarity. Is this better?
Yeah, also just like something that I just thought of right now, like I've actually been to Poland and like I've been to the camps and like the ghettos there. I mean, this also, you don't have to have gone to Poland to understand what I'm saying, but like I think after you go and you experience that and like if you understand, you know, like the 6 million plus that were killed and also tons of people who then afterwards like left Judaism or like left religiosity or whatever it is, like it's just hard for me to like wrap my head and like conceptualize that like, okay, so like the ones who didn't, like maybe down the line they'll get this like new relationship with God or like whatever Levinas is saying, but like does that really make sense at the expense of millions of dead and like I don't know the amount, but like let's just say hundreds of thousands who like left, who like had no faith in God and like their lives were just like so shaken up and terrible afterwards. Like it doesn't seem like a good like trade-off. Does that make sense?
Following you completely. I get, are you saying that after the Holocaust, we have a responsibility to keep the faith alive? Otherwise,
no, I'm saying that like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that what Levinas is saying is that after the Holocaust, people now have the ability to see God in a new way and embark on a new journey with God. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that, like, I don't think that that idea of his is like so strong that it can that it like has more validity than like the tragedies that happened in the Holocaust. Like who cares if your relationship with God could be good in the future if all this had to happen for you to like embark on this new journey? Does that make sense?
Okay. So you're saying that, yeah, actually, to be honest, Levinas is going to, if I understand you correctly, is going to lean in your direction. And we're going to talk about that for Levinas, after the Holocaust, there is no personal journey with God anymore. We're going to talk about that. So right now he is alluding to it a little bit, but we'll talk about how he will leave this idea behind. Because for him, there can be no peace or reconciliation with God after what happened, actually, right? So you see how he is in a way sounding like what you're hinting at, Milgram?
Yeah.
Okay, Harkstark, you had something to add? Did you want to join the discussion?
Yeah, I did, but then you said that Lavina says that we can't have a personal connection with God, so now I don't have anything to say.
Okay, so yes, let's get to that so that we don't get confused. Right here in this text, he is still talking of a possible vertical personal connection, but this is the only time in all of Levinas, and we're going to see why he chooses to turn his back on this. But for now, let's see what he's saying, because this is one possible response, right, to the Holocaust, is to allow the confusion to pave the way to a new revelation, to a new relationship. But let's see how it plays out, and then maybe it will be clear. So let's finish with this idea, right, of this God who is not obvious to our mind, where doubt always remains, right? And actually, there are two main reasons, right? Actually, well, some people have complained about this, right? There is one very famous contemporary philosopher called Schellenberg. Oops, I spelled him wrong. If you want to look into it, he talks about the cruelty of God. He says, why is God so vague and we are always confused? It's never clear. What game is he playing, right? He has this kind of argument that, here we are, longing to know God. We all would like to know, we all would like to be, to have these revelations, and God is over here eclipsing himself like a diva, like an opera singer. He's like hiding and playing these games with us. Why doesn't he just straight up come out and reveal himself and stop making us, making himself so elusive that we're always constantly in a state of confusion and doubt? So some people have criticized this idea of God wanting to remain hidden, right? So I want to go over two reasons why for Levinas this hiddenness is actually healthy, right? And then we'll see how Levinas moves away from everything we just said today. But for now, let's look at two main reasons why. So make sure you write this down. Why is it that God seems to choose to reveal himself in this kind of presence and absence and giving us this endless confusion and doubt, right? Why isn't God just clear? Okay, now there's one first reason. So two reasons. So first reason is the one we've talked about. If God was clear, he would be an idol, right? In other words, the sign that God is someone beyond us is that there is some confusion that remains, right? If God was one of us, if God was the pen, clear, crystal clear who God is, what he wants, where we're going, right? But the fact that God is somewhat elusive, the fact that he is somewhat confusing, is in fact the proof that he is someone bigger than us, transcendent, right? That's the word I'm using, right? The transcendence of God depends on, right, is at stake here. Okay, so the first reason, and I'm going to read a quote for that in a second, right? So the first reason why God must remain hidden, partly, not completely, but partly, is that if he was completely obvious, it wouldn't be God. It would be just an object that we completely understand, right? The fact that we don't completely understand God is in a way the sign that he is not a product of our imagination. This is a good answer to Nietzsche, by the way. Let me say that again. This is a good answer to Nietzsche, and then I'll get you Harkstar, right? The fact that we are confused, right? Not able to completely understand is a sign that God is not a product of our mind or imagination, right? Is the sign that we're dealing with something more than just a projection, right? If it's just a projection, we're comfortable. Ah, nice God helping me, you know, then of course we're happy. But the fact that we're uncomfortable, the fact that we're confused when it comes to God is a sign, a sure sign that we're dealing with something beyond our mental projection. Is everybody following me on this particular point? Right? If you were comfortable and yeah, God is that's why XYZ and now I'm happy, that's you. You invented this, right? But the moment where there is some discomfort and you're confused and you're angry and you're frustrated shows that you are, it seems, in touch with something which is more than a projection. Okay, Harkstar, go ahead.
Why is that a good answer? That if God was clear, then he'd be an idol, and that the fact that he's confusing is proof that he's bigger than us? Like, nobody's asking to completely understand God, but like if we just knew that God existed, like I personally, and like I feel like a lot of other people would be like, okay, like I don't need to know more. Like if God exists, like now I have proof that God exists and whatever, but like I don't need to know anything else. But like what I'm saying is that there's got to be an in between, so we know nothing. So I'm not asking for everything.
Yes, there is an in between because God is not just absent, he's also present, right? So there is evidence for his existence and so forth, right? If you follow the tracks, right, you can find plenty of evidence, right? Or if you're open to experiencing certain things, you can find evidence. But at the same time, because it's God, it's never going to be completely comfortable. Like Job, there is evidence, but at the same time, it's not completely comfortable. There is some element of question that remains, uncertainty that remains, right? So Levinas is not saying, God is just hiding behind the curtain. No. According to Levinas, there is a lot of evidence that God exists, right? But it's not completely convincing. We're not completely sure. Even the best believer is saying, well, by faith, I believe. I don't know for sure, right? Does that make sense, Harkstar?
Yeah, I don't really agree, but it makes sense.
Okay, great. So yeah, we have to go slowly because we are trudging through territory that Levinas actually is going to abandon eventually. So don't get too mad at him yet. So yeah, so this is one argument, right? Which Levinas gives us here on page 75. You can go with me. 75. If you go to the big paragraph there, the second paragraph, if you see towards the middle, you have IL in parentheses. That's where I want to read. Who is there? Put your hand in the screen. In the middle, you have, okay, great. Okay, the Enigma comes to us from Eleiti. Forget that. Here's the line you underline. The Enigma is the way of the absolute, foreign to cognition, right? The Enigma is something we do not completely understand. That's the definition of enigma, right? Enigma, it's enigmatic, not completely clear, mysterious. And he's saying this mystery is the way of the absolute, which is for Levinas another name for God, right? So that's what he's saying here. He's saying this is one of the ways. There are many ways, right, that God reveals himself. God can reveal himself through, like Wilkes was saying, a feeling of the presence of God. He can reveal himself through the scriptures, but he can also reveal himself through the confusion. This is the idea, right? One way that you can be in a moment of revelation is when you start to have doubts and questions and confusions about God, which is exactly what Job was going through, right? He started to question, and this in itself was the beginning of a revelation, right? So, okay, now there's a second reason, and this is the one I want to spend some time on. This is the reason that has to do with what I'm going to call God's shyness. Okay, so I'm going to talk about God as being shy. And basically shy, but also God being God wanting to seduce us, right? So this is kind of a new concept. Most of us are not used to this idea of God seducing us, but this is also, we're going to understand one of the reasons why God is kind of hidden, partly there. So let me explain. Let's look at a normal situation of seduction in between people, and then I'll transpose it to God. So this is seduction 101. This is a little parenthesis. Suppose you're in a bar. Let's say you're a guy. Let's be all sexist and chauvinistic. So you're a guy and you see a cute girl and you want to approach her. And what is the thing you shouldn't do right away in the first conversation? Suppose, well, let's imagine this is a girl you've been in love for a while, right? And you have a huge crush on her. And now here she is in the bar, sitting by herself. Finally, you have a chance to approach her. What should you not say? Yes, Critchell, very good. Oh my God, I am so into you. What's going to happen if you come up with a big revelation like this? What's the girl gonna do? Ladies, please tell us. How are you going to react as a woman? Let me hear the women reacting to Critchell.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Oh, the guy comes and he's like,
I mean, like, sure, if you don't know each other, it's pretty weird.
That's
like,
what I'm saying. If you know each other, it's a little bit, you don't know this guy, he's coming, I'm so into you. I mean, is this making it okay? So some of you are like, okay, it's gonna be weird, it's gonna be no excitement, Subon Kulova. In a way, right, you've taken a shortcut, which is making things like, yeah, it's fun to see someone tell you that, but is it gonna make you more romantically is it gonna make him attractive to you to have said that, right? That's the question. Alim is saying there's this aspect of hard to, in other words, you were too forward and you have in a way ruined some of the in between stages that are necessary for the attraction to be kindled, right? If you come in like, I'm in love with you, you're the woman of my life, I want to marry you, the woman is gonna be like, who are you, right? So in the same way, so just to understand, right, seduction is moving step by step. You make a little move and then you see how the person responds. If they respond positively, you make the next move, and slowly you are making your way into their heart, right? So for example, what would be a good move to make to the girl at the bar if you really want something to work out between you? What would be a small move you could make? Men in the class, what could you do? Okay, yeah, Leon, you talking right now. If you want to see her again, how would you do it? Come to my apartment tonight, we'll have no, right? How would you do it? Yes, Leon, very good. Leon is very good at this. All right, you're not going to be like, oh, let's go to a romantic dinner. The woman is going to be like, whoa, what's going on? Right? You're like, let's go get coffee. Now, if the woman says yes, then now you're encouraged, and maybe you can have lunch, and then maybe dinner, and then later dinner at your house, and et cetera, right? So little by little, based on their reaction, you're moving forward. You're not barging in and saying everything and blocking them, right? You're little by little, this is the key. You make a small move and you wait for the response. If the response is positive, next move, you wait for the response. Are you following how you seduce? Everybody good? This is good. When we're done with the pandemic, you can begin applying these. Right now it's difficult with the iPhone, right? But that's the idea. Now, imagine that God is doing the same thing with us. He makes a small move and then he waits. Is there going to be a response? No response. Okay. He waits a little bit. Again, a small move. No response. After 3 small moves, what's going to happen? Tell me. If you're a guy, you make 3 strike. It's going to be less and less, right? Now, suppose God makes a small move and you react and you're like, oh, this is interesting. I'm intrigued. What does this mean? Now, what can God do? Exactly. Well, not yet blessings, but he can make another move that's a little more powerful, right? And depending on your responsiveness, God can make bigger and more obvious moves, right? It's depending, and this is so key. We're going to read the text in a second, but really what we're learning here is that the amount of how much God reveals himself to us has a lot to do with how responsive we are. Let me say that, let me write it down, right? How much God reveals himself to us has a lot to do with how we respond, how responsive we are, right? If, for example, let's see, let me make it concrete. Suppose you've been wondering if God exists, like Harkstark, right? Harkstark is wondering, clearly, right, whether God exists. So he's there wondering, and then let's suppose a friend, comes and invites him. Oh, hey, there's an interesting lecture on God. Do you want to go? What would Harkstark do in order to begin the process? What should he do? Somebody say something. Yes, of course, right? Say yes, and then go see what happens. Okay, suppose he says yes, he goes now to the lecture, and there he meets an amazing person, really interesting guy, and the guy is telling him his experiences, and Harkstark is listening, and he's like, oh, this is interesting. And Harkstark is like, oh, well, I wonder, the things he's saying, whether they're true. So he's open, right? He's wondering more, right? As he continues, right, to proceed in this kind of, curious way, open, accepting invitations, accepting conversation, curious, wondering, more and more will happen. Now, suppose Harkstark, I'm putting you on the spot. Are you okay? Let's switch. Suppose you, right? Suppose now, right away, the friend invites you and you're like, oh, I'm not going to go to that dumb lecture, and you stay home. Okay, back to step one, right? Suppose you go and then you listen to that friend and you're like, that's bullshit. I'm not going to listen to that, right? You see how your responses, in a way, invite more or less, right, into the journey, right? That's what Levinas is saying. If God is seducing us, he's waiting for how responsive we are. He's waiting for our consent. How open are we? How curious are we to accept invitations, listen to other people's experiences, try things out, right? How open are we? The more open, says Levinas, the more evidence God can pour, right, into your life. That's the idea. Okay, any questions before we read the text? That's the idea. So in a way, right, some of us, right, have less experience of God than others. We need to ask ourselves, right, how responsive have I been to whatever little signs came my way? Did I immediately shut them down and say, that's nothing? Or no, I'm not going, this is stupid? Or did we give it a chance, right? Give the benefit of the doubt. That's the idea. So in many ways, right, the existence of God is not something that everybody knows. Why? According to Levinas, because some people are more responsive than others, right? That would be the idea. So let's read the text together. He says this here on page 70. Let's go there. I'm right in the middle of the second paragraph. You have the sentence, a lover makes an advance. Do you see it? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. Middle of the second paragraph on 70, the big paragraph. Okay, a lover makes an advance. So he's going to be talking about God in a second. 70, page 70. Middle of the big paragraph, a lover makes an advance. Okay, a lover makes an advance, but the provocative or seductive gesture has, if one likes, not interrupted the decency of the conversation and attitudes. It withdraws as lightly as it slipped in. In other words, you're sitting there talking like Leon, right, with a girl. You say, hey, would you like to get coffee? This is a cool conversation. It's insinuation. You're hinting that you might like her, but at the same time, it's not completely sure, right? Because you're not saying, I want to marry you. The girl is not completely sure your intention. Maybe you just like the conversation. Maybe you like her. She doesn't know, right? So it's not for sure. And then he makes now the transition to God. A God was revealed on a mountain or in a burning bush or was attested to in scriptures, right? Different revelations of God. But then here we are saying, what if it was a storm, right? What if the scriptures came to us from dreamers? So we have some hints of God and immediately we shut it down. This thing on the mountain, just a storm. The scriptures, bunch of poets, human beings wrote that. And we immediately dismiss, right, the call from our minds. This is what we do usually. The insinuation itself invites us up to do. Now, here's the key sentence you underline. It is up to us, or more exactly, it is up to me to retain or to repel this God without boldness, shy God, right? In other words, it's to the degree that we accept the signs, that we follow the signs, that we accept these small moments, these small glimpses, and open ourselves to more. It's up to us how much God can reveal himself, right? If we're constantly shutting down all the signs and all of the little epiphanies, we're in a way keeping God's revelation at a trickle, right? We're missing. We're not allowing more space for more evidence, okay? Am I clear? This is the most important point I wanted to make today. Am I clear for this? Any questions for this? Hark Stark, have you survived me putting you on the spot for half hour?
Yep, all good.
Okay, good. Any questions? Who is confused about what I said? If you're confused, half the class is confused. So
I have a question on a lover makes an advance. How are you trying to connect to that text?
So he's just saying God is acting like a lover, right? Just like between human beings, a lover makes an advance, but he's subtle, right? In other words, the lover is never going to be like, I love you, marry me. He's going to be subtle. Why? Because he wants to see if you want more, if you allow him in. So he does a little thing and then waits, but it's so subtle, but he wants to see, are you going to open up that window, right? Or that door. Once you open up the door, a little less subtle, and more door, less and less subtle, until it's obvious they have a huge crush on you. Do you follow, Williams?
Yes.
So God is acting in the same way, right? He's waiting for our consent. Just like the good seductive lover does a little thing and then waits to see how you react and then does a little more. God is the same. Like a seductive lover, he does a little thing and then waits. Are they going to open up a bit? And if you do, a little more and a little more until you have this massive epiphany, right? Technically. Okay. So that's the idea here, right? So these are the two main reasons that Levinas is explaining, right? Why this hiddenness, why God chooses to remain hidden in this way, and the possible way to journey towards this hidden God, right? To remain open, to remain curious, right? So in a way, the stance of openness, right? Curiosity is what is needed, right? To gradually approach this hidden God, right? Or to allow him to approach us, right? To allow him to approach us. So that's the main idea here. Now, what's interesting is that Levinas is not going to choose that path, right? So now we're going back to what Milgram and Hark Stark were complaining about, right? Levinas is actually, this is the only time in the whole thing that he's written, everything that he's written, where he's actually talking about the possibility of reconnecting with this hidden God on a personal level, me and God, right? He's going to turn his back on that. And so we're going to see, I guess I can tell you now the story of this. Yeah, let me do that now. So why, right? Why does Levinas opt out of this, possibility of allowing God to come near, right? He's in a way saying, no, I'm not gonna take that path. There's a beautiful story, a true story about Levinas, which I think he writes about himself. It's shortly after the war. He's lost, of course, his whole extended family in the Holocaust, and he finds himself, how when you, in a moment of despair, you're wandering in the streets and you looking for anything to just, find healing. And he sees the door of a church is open and he goes in, which is unusual for a Jew, right? But he goes in. And the first thing he sees is a huge painting, which depicts the biblical character of Hannah. So if you're familiar with the story of Hannah, this is from the Hebrew Bible. This is a woman who couldn't have children. And she was just in complete despair over this. And on one of her trips to the temple, she actually falls apart. She's in the temple, supposed to be praying normally like everybody, and she loses it because she's in so much despair. And so she begins to weep, and she's shaking, and she looks a mess. And so the priest comes to her to throw her out. And she explains, no, I'm not, the priest thinks she's drunk. And she says, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just in a very great despair, right? And so the priest says, okay, well, may God hear your prayer and grant you what you wanted, right? And a year later, she has a child, right? So anyways, the painting is showing her at this moment of despair where she is pouring out her heart to God, right? So she is in front of God, and she's just, her whole anxiety, anguish, and sorrow is pouring out right there in front of God, right? And Levinas remembers staring a long time at that painting, as though there was something there that he longed to do, but could not, right? This idea of, if I could finally pour out my grief to God for my family, for all the members of my family who died, if only I could open my heart and show you the pain and the sorrow that is there. And Levinas actually opts out of that option. He refuses to be comforted, right? He walks out of the church, never looks back. And he explains later that he refused to be comforted out of respect for the victims of the Holocaust who did not find any comfort. So Levinas, in a way, turns his back on any type of healing between him and God, any type of comfort, any type of peace, right? Inner peace that he could find after the Holocaust, because precisely his family was denied that comfort and that peace and that healing. And so out of respect for his family, for the victims, he chooses to carry this for the rest of his life. And you can sense it, this burden stays with him in everything he writes. You can sense the pain behind every word. I don't know if you sensed a little bit, but if you read a lot of Levinas, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of pain in the writing, right? So in a way, he chooses to walk away, right, from this notion of possible reconciliation, possible loving relationship, lover's relationship with God. This, in a way, he talks about it here, but this is the only time, and he'll never talk about it again. He will actually turn away from this notion and will attempt to seek God somewhere else, right? He's not going to seek God on this level. He's going to turn away and look in another direction. And we're going to see what kind of God he will find as he turns away from the painting, right? From this possibility of being comforted. Everybody clear on what I just said? Right? This is it. This is the only time we see this possibility of a, loving relationship, lover's relationship between us and God, as God slowly, right, makes his way towards us and we're open. Levinas opts out of that. He's like, I'm not going to be open. I'm not opening up. I'm not pouring my grief. I'm keeping it, right? I'm keeping it because they were denied the comfort, and I therefore refuse to be comforted, right? Alim? Yes, you could. I love that, Alim. Say it to the class. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I was asking if like the painting was like maybe like a beckoning from God, maybe, because like there's like this whole thing with like signs and like accepting signs, and like what types of signs you accept. Maybe like by turning his back on this painting, he's like turning his back on like this type of God that people believed in before the Holocaust.
Exactly, right? Absolutely. Could have been a sign, right? He wanders in this church and boom, what painting you have? Exactly what perhaps he needed. The possibility of pouring out his heart after what happened, right? And, right, you see how he, in a way, opts out, right? And we can, right? Interestingly, he finds God eventually, but he chooses a different path, right? So we're going to see, he doesn't go to hell, right? For opting out of the painting, but he finds a different path, which for him is more respectful of the victims. And we're going to see what that path is next time, right? He's concerned that the path of comfortableness is an insult to the victims. And so in a way he opts out, and maybe he misses the sign. Yes, Alim, I like the way you put it. But we're going to see next time the path that he actually finds, which for him is more honorable, right? Honors, respectful of the victims, right? So we're going to talk about that other path and this other vision of God, right? A God who doesn't comfort, but a different kind of God. We're going to talk about that next time. Okay, any questions on anything I said? All right, I'm going to stop the recording.